Today on Community Voices, we're talking to Joseph DeLappe. He's professor of art at UNR's art department and also head of the digital media studio at UNR. Welcome to KUNR, Joseph. Nice to have you back.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
The project that we're here to talk about today is at the Sheppard Fine Arts Gallery. It's called Iraqimemorial.org. Started as an online exhibition and now has come into form, and it's moving. I've been to the website, and I can't wait to see the designs and the artists in person. First of all, Joseph, tell us about Iraqimemorial.org. You started this 3 years ago. What were you thinking when you came up with this concept?
Well, the concept came about really quite some time ago, about 2004, when the World Trade Center Memorial Competition was essentially published online. They put a website with about 5,200 entries that they received for that competition. And I remember when that came out, it was right about almost a year into the Iraq War. And I remember thinking at the time, wow, this is really intense. And I really love that they published all of these proposals online. But I began to think about the kind of contradictions and the fact that it was more than likely that there would never be a competition like that to create a memorial to the many thousands of civilians in Iraq who were dying by increasing numbers at that time. The idea kind of sat with me for a couple of years, and due to responsibilities at the university, being department chair and that sort of thing, I didn't do anything with it until I went on sabbatical 2007 into 2008. And so in 2007, I actually launched this project, which is essentially a website, an open call, an ongoing call to artists, architects, and creative individuals or groups to submit proposals of imagined memorials to the civilian casualties in Iraq. The project has garnered so far just about 180 proposals from artists from all over the world. And it's not just proposals. That's been kind of interesting that it evolved. I would say the majority are proposals, but there's also a lot of artists who responded to the call by posting works that they had actually created, from installation works to performances and things. So it's kind of a mixed archive, but I loosely refer to everything on there as a proposal, because most artworks are a proposal saying this is something about a particular idea, concept, and in this case it is all surrounding the issue of civilian casualties in Iraq and remembering them, dedicated to paying tribute and that sort of thing.
Now, what kind of artists responded to the call? Who submits their proposals?
It's very diverse. We've had everything from well-established architects to contemporary artists, video artists, performance artists, landscape designers, ceramicists. It's very diverse, and it was set up that way. The World Trade Center memorial process was very strict in terms of guidelines and what you could actually submit, materials, processes, all these kind of things. I left it wide open. I wanted artists to think of ideas from the individual gesture to global gestures. And so we have everything from artists doing kind of performative acts, reading particular blog entries from actual Iraqi civilians while riding the subway in New York City, reading those aloud, to one artist who proposed a satellite that would beam kind of a laser as a light that would sort of traverse around the globe that you would see as this kind of dedication. So it's really broad, but everything was focused on drawing attention to this issue and in a creative and imaginative way.
I'm kind of fascinated by the aspect of having artists design memorials and the intersection of art and a memorial process or a process of remembrance. What is the relationship between art and the way we remember and the way we grieve? How can artists help us through this process?
That's a really interesting question, and I've done quite a bit of research leading up to this project, and particularly into memorials that were created in Germany regarding the Holocaust. And it's one of the few instances where memorials have served a purpose other than to glorify a kind of military victories, sort of monuments to war and kind of remembering lost soldiers and that sort of thing, which is completely appropriate. But actual memorials to civilian casualties are kind of few and far between. And so I think what artists can bring, artists and architects actually, are perhaps even more appropriately kind of geared towards this, of visualizing, trying to create something in visual or experiential form that essentially brings back a notion of thinking about, of considering, of a memorial in a way is a kind of temporary reenactment. You know, when you see a list of names, it's kind of, you imagine each one of them dying in these circumstances. And so there's a lot of listing, there's a lot of notation, a lot of marking that many of the artists have done. I think it's a way, many of the works are very ritualistic. They're physical, they're ephemeral, they're all over the map in terms of what they are. But I think what ties them all together, from the architects to the artists to the performers, is an attempt to visualize something that is very difficult to even think about, very difficult to even conceptualize. You know, hundreds of thousands of deaths, and so it's in some ways it's a futile gesture, and that's intentional, and it's a way of kind of creating an impossible goal in a way. How do you create something that can actually seriously recognize this devastating experience that has befallen people in Iraq? It's a huge conundrum. It's an impossible question to answer, and so it's the proposals in a way are kind of, they are proposals. It's like, maybe this will work. Maybe, what about this? What about that? And part of that, of creating this project, is that the website itself and now the exhibition both serve as memorials in terms of this repository of these ideas, of these gestures of contrition in a way, you know. And so there's a larger context and an individual context as well in terms of the proposals that I think is really important to think about.
You're exactly right. You cannot, through a memorial, make up for what has happened to the people of Iraq, the civilian casualties of Iraq. But the process of designing the memorials and thinking about them and talking about them and discussing them opens up a whole other conversation about what's happening over there, why people are dying, why we have to build these memorials.
Precisely.
And I think it's a very intriguing way to go about getting that question asked and answered, Joe. Very creative.
It's very important. And you know, and from my stance as an artist, I mean, I consider myself at this point in my life an artist / activist. I mean, I really kind of I want to change things with my work and my efforts. I was deeply concerned, and I have been deeply concerned about the fact that the civilian casualties in Iraq have been really kind of out of the picture. I mean, you read countless articles, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, anywhere. The first thing that is always mentioned is our loss in blood and treasure, you know, and that there might be something saying, and not to mention the many thousands of, you know, but it's very rare. It's something that I think it's very difficult for us to accept as a country, as a culture, what has happened in our name, and what, you know, we're part of this, and it's a way, I think, of kind of claiming some responsibility on a personal level and encouraging others to think about this issue in a way that is hopefully moves beyond the abstract. But again, perhaps an impossible task, but it seemed very important to try to make something that would get people to consider this really important issue.
We're talking to Joseph DeLappe, Associate Professor at UNR's Art Department and Director of the Digital Media Studio. We're talking about Iraqimemorial.org, an online exhibition and call to artists that is coming to fruition here at the UNR's Sheppard Fine Arts Gallery, coming up Thursday, March 4th. There'll be a gallery walkthrough at 1 to 2, symposium from 3 to 5, and then a reception at 5:30 to 7 p.m. Now tell us about the symposium. Who's going to be talking, and what are we going to talk about?
The symposium is going to be really quite fascinating. It goes from 3 till 5 p.m. on March 4th, and we have 4 of the artists who were selected for the exhibition project will be there, including Tony Allard from San Diego. Amro Hamzawi is going to be presenting long distance from Paris. He's a photographer who's documented Iraqi civilians in a project called Iraqis Today. And we have Patrick Lichtke, who is an artist and a scholar who will be there, and Kat Sorgel Marshall from Louisiana State University, who's a landscape architect. And so those four artists and myself will be starting off with the first hour kind of talking about individual proposals and then the project in general, just sort of a description and a kind of a summation of the ideas and the concepts behind the project. The second hour will involve primarily jurors from the project, including our own Dr. Marjorie Vecchio, who is the director of the Sheppard Gallery, and Dr. Bernadette Buckley from Goldsmiths, University of London, will be speaking. Dr. Ann Keniston from the English department here at UNR. She wasn't a juror, but she's actually written quite a bit on literature after 9/11 and should provide an interesting perspective. Dr. David Simpson from UC Davis, who's written a fascinating book called 9/11, The Culture of Commemoration, and Raul Zamudio, who's a New York-based independent curator. And all of them were involved in the project in terms of choosing works. And actually, most of them will be involved in writing essays for the planned book project as well.
Now tell us about the book project.
The book project is something that will hopefully come out of this exhibition, besides our efforts to travel the exhibition, which should hopefully be happening over the next 2 years to a number of locations. But the intention is to create essentially what would be a scholarly catalog surrounding the project. And so we would feature most likely the works that are in the exhibition and their pages that they have designed, and individual essays by the jurors and by myself. And that book would be available, and all proceeds from it would go towards Iraqi civilian relief. And really excited to see that come to fruition. And I think this kind of sort of one step of this project is the internet reality of this project, which has had its own kind of life and continues to have many thousands of hits every month and visits. Exhibition is a different experience, and the book will as well be a different experience. And ultimately, my goal with this project, would be to have this exhibited in Baghdad. And I've made some initial steps towards that direction. We'll see if we can bring that to fruition.
That would be very exciting.
Yeah, I think so.
The website is www.iraqimemorial.org. The exhibition will be at Sheppard Fine Arts Gallery through March 12th, going on now. And the symposium is coming up on Thursday, March 4th. Gallery walkthrough from 1 to 2, symposium from 3 to 5, and then a reception for the project from 5:30 to 7 p.m. The Sheppard Fine Arts Gallery is in the Church Fine Arts building here on the UNR campus. We're talking with Joseph DeLappe. He's creator of the site and associate professor of art here at UNR. Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.